Thank you. Thank you guys for joining Monthly Mindset. So we do this every single month. As you guys know, it has nothing to do with real estate. So you can breathe easy. You can rest easy. We're not talking about salesmanship. We're not talking about those kind of things. It's just good stuff coming from Heather, who most of you already know and love, which is why the room is so filled up with all these people anxious to jump on to Monthly Mindset. It's funny how you don't know, hey, is this thing good? Is it like adding value to our market center and to the agents until the one time that Heather goes on vacation and I'm getting hate texts and emails. Where's Monthly Mindset? Where did Heather go? She's not allowed to leave, kind of thing. So thank you for coming and joining us. Heather, you have the floor.
Well, good morning, everyone. Chad, I always love your introductions. Thank you. I am a huge fan of coming and doing Monthly Mindset. In fact, I had a little panic today when I looked at the invite and the end date was next month. And I was like, oh God, maybe they're setting this up for a conversation with me and I'm gonna get let go. And now what do I do? And Alan, we need to work on a picture of you so that we can like paste it up on the board. So last month we talked about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and attention deficit disorder, and you guys loved it so much that I thought, well, maybe we'll take another sort of topic related to mental illness that many of us may struggle with, but aren't sure how to talk about. And I wanted to sort of preface this with, I invite you to have discussions about how these symptoms may or may not impact you, but I also invite you to not make assumptions about what you may or may not deal with. Mental illness is a sort of tricky and complicated thing, and there's lots of belief systems around it. Some people grow up thinking that mental illness is something that you're doing wrong, when in actuality, it's a chemical imbalance in your body. Some people grow up talking about everything they feel, and then they get tired and don't want to talk about their feelings anymore. So they sort of just manage it the best they can and think that this is just kind of how life is supposed to be. And so one of the things I love the most about coming and visiting with you guys is that you ask really good questions that help me even learn more about what I do. So today we are going to talk about depression. And before I sort of launch into that, I guess, I think Michael asked if there were slides from last time. Yeah, I sent them out. So I bet someone would be able to send them to you.
Jewel can help with that.
Jewel got it. I wanted to just lay a little teaser for next month. So we're going to do something a little bit out of the box. And I think Tyler is going to send out a link / really short survey for you guys so that we can do a Q&A. So things that you have wanted to ask me or have been curious about, but haven't quite found the time or space or opportunity to ask it, things you've thought of in between monthly mindsets. And I thought we could have kind of a robust discussion of me answering your guys' questions. So they can be about how to manage your day-to-day. They can be about mental illness. They can be about relationships. They can be about why the sky is blue. I may not be able to answer that for you, but we can have a robust discussion about it. So I thought today we would start a little bit with depression. And the reason I chose depression as opposed to anxiety, which we can talk about in the future, is I think a lot of us deal with some sort of low-level depressive disorder without really realizing that that's what we're dealing with. And I will share with you guys that I have had many conversations over the last couple of years with my PCP, who is an angel from wherever she's from, about symptoms that I struggle with on a regular basis. Those conversations have increased since COVID because I struggle with time management. I struggle with staying focused. I struggle with wanting to eat things that don't feel my body in a way that's productive. And so she and I have had a lot of conversations about whether that fits into sort of the realm of some sort of disorder. So this is very normal. Lots of us deal with this. And I wanted to kind of help you guys learn a little bit about what depression is. So it's, first of all, a mental illness that's categorized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disease and Disorders, which is a huge mouthful. It's basically the Bible of psychiatrists and therapists. And depression runs on a spectrum. You can deal with very, very sporadic symptoms. You can deal with very, very pervasive symptoms where they're plaguing you every day, all day, and requiring a lot of intervention. But essentially, depression is a mental health diagnosis, and it's characterized by persistently depressed mood and includes this idea that we're losing interest in the things that we either used to love or think we still love. And that causes impairment in our day to day. So it makes it difficult to get out of bed. It makes it difficult to focus on tasks. It makes it difficult to engage in relationships. And what separates depression from, say, having a rough patch is that it plagues you for a long period of time. And usually it's around 6 months. And you've had these symptoms for most of the days of the week throughout those 6 months. So it can also be known as major depressive disorder. That's a super common mental illness that negatively affects the way that you feel, your thought processes, and how you act. So basically, this persistently depressed mood builds on itself and then creates this idea that you're not good enough, you'll never be good enough, the work that you do isn't good enough, it doesn't matter anymore. And then it sort of can start to infiltrate your relationships. Most of the time, this happens either between partners or in families with children, relating to your kids and connecting with your kids. That can be one of those things that sort of snaps you and says, oh gosh, I think I'm dealing with something. And really, depression, the symptoms of it can lead to like some pretty big emotional and physical problems. It can make you feel physical pain. It can affect the way that you sleep, sometimes sleeping more than you think you should, sometimes sleeping less, or having sort of insomnia type symptoms. And it really does decrease your ability to function at work and at home. And when we say it decreases your ability, I want to be very clear that the majority of the time, this is because your physical health is suffering, because that bottom of that Maslow's triangle is not being cared for. So often you aren't eating very well, you're not sleeping very well, and you're not able to like get sunshine, move your body, things like that. But on the other side of that, depression is super manageable. And many of us, many people that struggle with depressive disorders, once we find the right routine and the right interventions, it ends up being something that we don't think about nearly as often. So some common symptoms that you might experience: feeling pervasive sadness, loss of interest in things that either used to bring you pleasure or you think you're interested in. So like if you love to run, but all of a sudden you have no interest in running, or you love to go to museums and all of a sudden you just can't seem to get off the couch to be able to do that. Changes in appetite. Often this is weight gain because we tend to isolate when we experience symptoms of depression, but it can also be weight loss because we get this idea and feeling of listlessness. And so sometimes eating can feel like it just takes too much effort. Difficulty sleeping, sleeping way too much, not being able to sleep at times of the day that are typical for you. So if you're a night shift worker and you usually sleep during the day, you get home from work and you're not able to do that. Loss of energy, often related to not being able to sleep or eat well. Restlessness. For me, if I'm experiencing any sort of things that might be considered depression, it's usually that I have a really hard time focusing on my tasks. Like I'll sit down to write up an assessment, and after 10 minutes, I'm thinking about my grocery list, or I'm thinking about how the dogs need to go out, even though they went out 45 minutes ago, or, oh, I need to change the sheets on my bed. So sometimes it's that distractibility or slowed movements that sort of can create some of those problems in your day to day. As depression becomes more pervasive, it can lead to this idea of feeling guilty or feeling like what you contribute to the world doesn't matter. What you contribute to your family doesn't matter. Even what you contribute to yourself doesn't matter. So that distractibility and that restlessness can often be confused with ADD and ADHD as well. So there is a really good reason, if you're experiencing these things, to have a conversation with a therapist or psychiatrist or even your PCP. And then as those symptoms become more pervasive and they escalate, we start to think about things like, it'd be a lot easier if I could just fall asleep and not wake up. We think sometimes about suicide. We think about running away and escaping our life. maybe it'll be easier if I just started over somewhere else. So those are the times that you really want to seek some sort of guidance, professional help, even just having a conversation with a professional in which you share these things in a safe way can help you feel like there's something on the other side of it. A couple little fun facts for you guys. Depression affects about 1 in 15 people in any given year. The research is super varied, depends on the sample size, it depends on the type of study that people are doing, and it depends on how people self-report. So as much as we like to depend on data and information because science, we don't know that this isn't more like 1 in every 10 people, but 1 in every 6 people experience feeling depressed at some point in their life. So they went through it and they're now not experiencing it anymore, or they continue to experience it on a regular basis. It can invade your life at any point in time. My thoughtfulness about depression and whether or not that was what I was dealing with happened in my early 40s, but usually the onset is kind of late teens, early 20s. Interestingly enough, when people deal with schizophrenia or get diagnosed with schizophrenia, it's also late teens to mid 20s. So there's something that happens in that final stage of our brain development that really can trip us up. And it's very, very important at that point in our life to have people who we trust that we can have conversations with about those changes. Women are significantly more likely than men to experience depression. Some studies, again, depends on the sample size and the folks involved, but about 1/3 of women will experience some sort of depressive episode in their lifetime. Depression is hereditary, about half. It's kind of interesting. When I do an intake with a new client, I almost always ask, does anyone in your family deal with mental illness? And many times people haven't talked about it with their parents or their aunts and uncles or their cousins. And so when a parent deals with depression, your child is about 40% likely to deal with that as well, or at least experience the symptoms of it. And like I said before, some people manage the symptoms of depression throughout their whole life and nobody has any idea that they do. And they may not even think that it's a big deal, but there are times when we want to question, is this me? Like, is this something that I'm dealing with? And again, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders, we're on version 5 right now. It takes 1,000 years to write every version and it's very, very heady. But if you do go to a doctor and you talk about your symptoms, they will do what's called a differential, and they'll ask you about other types of symptoms that you deal with. So depression can also be what's known as disruptive mood dysregulation. So some people, I don't know if you guys have ever studied like highly sensitive people or people who are empaths. Sometimes the way that our environment impacts us can affect our mood in such a significant way that it can bring on feelings of depression. Persistent depressive disorder is one that is highly resistant to treatment. So even if you're doing behavioral health intervention, medication intervention, even some people who go through ECT or what we used to call shock therapy don't respond to that. That one is known as persistent depressive disorder. Premenstrual or postmenstrual dysphoric, that's when your depressive symptoms align with the cycle of your period. So that's only women usually that deal with that. There are very few rare instances of that occurring in men. And that's a whole nother monthly mindset. Maybe not a topic that we'll want to talk about, but it's a whole nother one. And then we have substance-induced depressive disorder, which is when your symptoms of depression are only present when you use some sort of substance, whether illicit or legal. Any questions so far? Sometimes this one can get into people's heads. I can't scroll through all of you. There's a lot of you today. Okay. Feel free to interrupt me if something comes up, okay? So how do we manage it? Well, I've just given you all of this really heavy stuff to process. So let's talk a little bit about how manageable depression can actually be. The very first thing that I want to tell you is that depression is a diagnosis, but symptoms are what you manage. And so when somebody says, I'm depressed, it means they're experiencing the feelings of depression. But sometimes we interpret that as, I'm always depressed all the time, and I'm going to hide in a corner and not talk about it with you. But I want to make the distinction between being depressed and experiencing the symptoms of depression. They are super manageable. So if we feel like the symptoms that we're dealing with are relatively manageable, We have some solid relationships. We're maybe working a job that we have some enjoyment from. We are following a diet and exercise routine that's meaningful for us. And we're kind of taking care of our physical self. We're sleeping well, sleeping consistently well, things like that. All of those tools are what you use to manage the symptoms that come out on the other side very well. So in my opinion, as a clinician and as a human, one of the most impactful things for my clients has been this idea of activity. And it's different for everybody. Some people, it's like, I only want to lift heavy shit with loud music in my ear, with nobody else around, and I want to grunt and I want to throw stuff around the gym. That's the only thing that will work for me. And then for some people, it's, I want to cruise around the park in the sunshine with my music in my ears, or maybe podcast in my ears, with my dogs who sniff every single tree. And it's not about the calorie burn, it's about the time that I spend dedicated to my own care. I think that one is one of the more significant interventions that you can consider, because as you build that habit becomes a habit that you build other things off of. I think the single number one best indicator of whether or not we manage depressive symptoms is your sleep. 1000%, if you find a way to go to bed at a consistent time, sleep through the night for an amount of hours that's beneficial for you. For me, it's 8.5. For a lot of my clients, it's between 6 and 7. It just depends on the human that you are. If you can do that consistently, most likely your brain will have the time to sort of refresh itself overnight. Think about it sort of like restarting your computer or turning your computer off rather than just locking it. And giving your brain and your body some time to heal from the stressors of our day to day. When you decide, or you and your doctor decide, that your depression is becoming unmanageable on your own and you need a little extra intervention, there's a couple of ways to seek professional support. The first is to work with an individual therapist. People find that sharing their story and the things that they deal with is one of the most helpful things that they can do, because that person is literally giving them 55 or 90 or whatever number of minutes to be exactly who they are. The space belongs to them. They're not being judged for what they say, and they're able to share their feelings and their frustrations in a very, very safe place with somebody who literally cannot tell anyone else what they're dealing with. So it becomes this very safe little cluster of two people where they may be the only one that knows that you're dealing with this, but at least there's that one person that's on your side. Therapy can help do things like improve your coping skills. So if you need somebody to say, what does it look like to build a routine and how do we do that? That person will do that with you. If you need to process through emotions and through your thought processes and through the things that trigger you, i.e. stressful work environments, stressful home lives, difficulty with negative thought processes, thinking that you're not good enough for the world and you'll never be good enough for the world. If you need to process through that stuff, it is incredibly helpful to have somebody who has been trained to be able to give you the space to do that. And it may not feel perfect on the other side of it. It may not feel like you're making progress sometimes, but, and of course I'm biased because I am a therapist. I think that sitting with someone on a regular basis who isn't your friend and only has your best interest at heart can be one of the most beneficial things in helping you see yourself through someone else's eyes that doesn't have to like you. And I sometimes get into little discussions with other therapists about this, but I really do very deeply believe in the therapeutic relationship with another human. And then secondarily to professional support, a really incredibly significant amount of people find that these like low dose antidepressant medications are the like one little key to giving them the boost that they need to be able to manage their day to day. So if you take an antidepressant that has a little bit of like a stimulant effect to it, it can actually help make your brain sharper, which makes you more able to manage the things on a regular basis. And it makes you more likely to think, I'm not a bad human, I'm just struggling with this particular problem today. So the combination of medication And therapy can often build like some clarity and give you this like different kind of boosted foundation to operate from, so that you don't constantly feel like you're sludging through mud all the time. Now, the majority of antidepressants have a non-habit forming and are not non-habit forming property and are not habit inducing. So you can go on and off antidepressants with the help of your doctor so that you don't necessarily have to be on them forever. Okay, so here's some keys, some little tips for you. If you feel like this might describe you and you feel like you are in an incredibly stressful environment and you're not really quite sure what to do about it, here's a couple of little tips that you guys can do to shift your perspective and shift the way that you're experiencing your symptoms. The first is to reduce distractibility. And interestingly enough, these coping skills align with the coping skills that we talked about with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We got to regain control over your environment. For me, it's removing all of the clutter that's around me so that I can actually give myself every little bit of power that I can to be able to focus on the task that I'm like need to work on. Right now, behind my laptop, there is the wine advent calendar from Costco, 2 pairs of AirPods, I don't know why, my phone, 3 pens, a to-do list that has not had everything checked off on it yet, a Rice Krispie treat wrapper that I ate right before I hopped on Monthly Mindset, my journal, and my pit bull just decided to bark at something in the hallway, and now so she's sitting on my feet. All of those things are going to distract me from the fact that I'm engaged with you guys. So when you start to feel stressed and overwhelmed, literally take control over what you can in that moment. For those of you that have an office, close the door for 5 minutes. I promise you, unless there is an actual emergency, people will not notice that you shut your door for 5 minutes. The second is to disconnect. For me, this is like literally leaving my house without my phone. I know it can be scary. I know there's always this fear that there's going to be an emergency and somebody's going to need you immediately. But I can assure you that if you take a technology break and you close your computer and you leave your phone at home and you walk around the block for 10 minutes, it is very unlikely that anyone is going to have their world implode. So if you need to avoid stress and you need to avoid feeling overwhelmed, and you can do that by disconnecting, I would highly encourage you to leave your technology on your desk and go take a walk for 5 or 10 minutes. Use it as an excuse to go get a Diet Coke. Use it as an excuse to go get some sort of delicious pastry from the coffee shop down the street. Like whatever it needs to be, take that opportunity for you. And actually like pay in cash. Like you don't even have to bring your wallet. You can literally just bring $5 with you and your key to get back in the office, and you're all set to disconnect. The third, and I'm feeling very hypocritical talking about this right now, is to exercise really good boundaries. I have looked at my calendar for the next couple of weeks and it's bananas, which means that I've let some of my boundaries slide with how much I work during the day and how many appointments I take. Some of that is because I'm hoping to take 2 weeks off at Christmas. Some of it is because I really like to help people and I like to find space in my schedule to be able to give back to them. So this could be in like a KW opportunity. This would be something like having office hours. Like you're allowed to interrupt me between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. But between 9 a.m. and noon, I'm going to shut my door. And unless something is literally on fire, please use your own self-empowerment to solve whatever problem it is that you need to solve. And so creating that boundary gives you the opportunity to be able to take some control over the distractibility of your day and disconnect from feeling like you have to be immediately available to everyone. Your team likely, because all of you do really wonderful, smart hiring, your team likely has the capability to solve some problems on their own, or maybe together they can brainstorm it. Maybe if your door is closed, they'll go to a peer. So creating that boundaries can help you really find a little bit of work time to disconnect. The fourth one, and one of my favorite interventions that my clients hate the most because it feels weird to do it, is to challenge the way that you talk about yourself. I am not a failure because I have let my boundaries be infringed upon over the next couple of weeks. It just means that I struggle with managing them sometimes. And so if you flip this idea that you failed into something purposeful, like, okay, listen, I maybe slipped up a little bit. I maybe gave away a little bit of my time, but I'm going to prioritize starting January 4th. And I'm only going to do so many hours in a day, or I'm only going to work so many days of the week, or I'm going to stop working at 6 p.m. Whatever that language is, just flip it. For those of you who I've talked to maybe one-on-one, and I think earlier on in mindsets, we talked about this, but the word should needs to be completely eliminated from your guys' vocabulary. It really only induces this idea of shame. I should work out indicates that if you don't work out, you're a piece of garbage. If you say, I have an extra hour and a half and I can go work out, or I could go work out, then you're empowering yourself to use your time in a way that feels productive for you. So my challenge to you with the language changing is to look for opportunities where you either use the word should, and you can flip that into something that is could or can, and then to take one of those negative beliefs that you have about yourself, i.e., I'm a failure at boundaries, and flip it. I'm definitely not a failure at boundaries because I have really good ones with my clients. I just have a tendency to infringe on my own time management skills. So I need to just work on that a little bit more. Okay, at work specifically, here is what I would love to see you guys do if this is what you're dealing with. The very first thing is to develop a strong network. And if you can't develop a strong network, develop a relationship with one other person that you can flash a look at or have a key phrase with that helps to know that you're struggling. If you have a strong relationship with somebody at work and they can start to recognize your behaviors, they will help support you when you're in a position where you can't support yourself. The second is to create this idea of a toolbox. So on this last slide that we talked about, this is the foundation of your toolbox. I'm giving you 4 ways to manage your day-to-day, to have skills in your pocket that you can use. You just have to take the opportunity to actually use them. So when you create a toolbox, it's things that you know that will flip into your brain when you need them to be able to come back and focus on a task that needs to get done. For those of you that have 1,000 tasks a day, I think it might be a bigger idea of like maybe managing the number of tasks that you have to do in a day, because I know that you're all very important and you have very, very important things to manage that are often on timelines. But if you can take that 5 or 10 minutes to decompress a little bit, grab a coffee, take a walk, listen to I have a 10-minute mindset podcast that I pop on when I need to sort of redirect my thought process. Just use those 10 minutes. And in that way, you're avoiding some of the impact of excessive procrastination that you might have that then makes you feel like a failure, that then convinces you that you're worthless, that then convinces you that nothing matters. So we want to try to avoid the spiral of how our negative thoughts impact us on a regular basis. So in order to avoid procrastination, there's kind of 2 things that I would love to encourage you to do. The first is to time block some preparation in your schedule if you know that you're going to have to do something that you don't want to do or something that upsets you. If you have to present at a conference and you know that that brings you a lot of anxiety, prep for it in advance. Don't wait till the night before. The more prepared you feel, the less overwhelmed you will feel. You'll probably still feel anxious when you walk on the stage, but at least the information will be in your brain and you'll know that you know what to say. That will come back to you because you've spent the time preparing for it. The tougher one with this particular set of tools is when you have to have a difficult conversation with someone else. Let's say somebody didn't follow through on something and you need to confront them about it, or somebody's experiencing a crisis and you logistically do not have the time to support them, or somebody is spiraling out of control and treating you poorly and you need to address that issue immediately before it gets completely out of control. You really have to understand that those difficult interactions and those crises will trigger your negative thought processes faster than anything else. So we either have to figure out a way to address them immediately in the moment, i.e., if somebody mouths off at you at work, immediately saying something like, "You won't talk to me that way. I'm going to walk away. When you're ready to have an adult conversation, I will be here." And then turning, in my case, turning on my heel, very dramatically and walking away, or turning around and letting that person know that you're not going to tolerate that sort of behavior. And then the fourth one in your kind of wellness toolbox for work is to start to recognize and understand how to create those self-calming techniques. So as a personal example, I am a very indignant human being. So if I see somebody doing something incorrectly, I'm going to probably make a big fuss about it. And I think that the most interesting thing about this is that I recognize this in myself literally immediately. So perfect example, I went to the gym this morning. It was leg day. Leg day is always really hard for me. I feel like everybody else at the gym was watching me fail at my particular workout today. That they likely didn't even know I was there, but for some reason in my head, I felt like people were watching me. And so I see this guy move from one side of the weight rooms to the next, and he racks his 50-pound dumbbells, super badass. He racks them and then he walks away. And I'm like, oh, he must be going to the paper towel dispenser to get the sanitizer and the paper towel to clean his weights. That man walked to the other side of the gym and he left his dirty, disgusting, germ-filled weights sitting on that rack for some unsuspecting person to come and pick them up and have no idea. And I let that get me so mad that my friend Caroline, who was with me, said, are you okay? Like, why is there steam coming out of your ears? And I said, that guy didn't clean his weights. And she goes, okay, can you control that? Or is that something that maybe you need to let go? And what I ended up doing was going in, getting a paper towel and wiping off the weights myself, because then I knew they were clean. But it's just funny because there's literally no reason for that to make me angry. But it did. It took up like 3 minutes of my time today, like just really being steamed in my head about this guy who like completely disrespected every single person in the gym by not wiping off his weights. And by the way, we're still in the middle of like a germ centered community. Like we're supposed to be taking extra care of people. So I learned in that lesson that I don't have to be mad about that kind of stuff. I can just either do nothing or clean the weights myself. So I cleaned them myself and everybody walked away. And I'm sure that guy had no idea that he was a total idiot. And cool. I don't need to do anything about that. So
Heather,
when you, yeah,
sorry if I could interject.
please.
I find myself in similar situations. And the thing that I grapple with is like one side of my brain is like, don't enable that behavior. You know, that person is not going to make a change for the better unless, you know, like either I say something, but like in an exact situation like yours, it's like, but is it really worth it? And I see myself getting in that kind of conversation spiral, upward, downward, whichever way you want to consider it.
Yeah. What do you usually gravitate towards? Like, do you usually say something or do you usually like walk away and just sort of let it go?
I find as I'm aging, I become less tolerant. So I will say things more often. And Chad is probably smiling and like nodding. And yeah, because I'm entering the zone of like, I'm giving zero shits on more things in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you raising your hand? I don't see your name at the bottom of your screen, but are you raising your hand?
Teresa's raising her hand.
Oh, hi, Teresa.
Hi. I've struggled with the same thing, and I did have a counselor who gave me a really neat tool to look at, and I use it for everything.
Ooh.
And so she's like, what is the outcome that you want from this situation? And then the next is, do you think that your actions are going to create that outcome? And if the answer is yes, then we go ahead and we have a conversation. If the answer is no, because it's going to create some drama or added stress or whatnot, then I have the two options, as you said. I can either fix it myself or let it go. But when she gave that to me, it just gave me such a position of power because she had me forward thinking into where I was going to go. So
I love that. It definitely sounds like something I would not only use, but recommend other people use, because what does it do? It gives you all the control, right?
Right.
It literally gives you every single ounce of control in that situation. So unlike Alan, I've definitely become, I share I've become less tolerant as I age, but I will actually say something less often than I used to. And so like, I didn't say anything to the guy today because I just didn't get the feeling that he was going to care that I said that. And like you said, Teresa, it probably wouldn't have like gotten me anywhere. Like I probably wouldn't have felt any better, because he probably would have just been like, you know, who are you? Why are you talking to me? So then I would have just ended up feeling badly about it, you know, that kind of thing. So you are correct, Chad. That is a fantastic pattern interruption. And it's a way for us to sort of reinvent those habits that we have a tendency towards ongoing. So this works with negative thought patterns, like what's the outcome I'm looking for from this negative thought? Like, what's the outcome I'm looking for from I shouldn't eat that food? Well, I don't know. There isn't an outcome, because I don't need to should every decision I make. I can eat that food that maybe is less conducive to my body operating at its ideal whatever. And then maybe tomorrow I eat something different. I don't know why I always choose food. It's really such a complicated topic to choose, but like your negative thought processes usually don't serve you, and they usually aren't going to get you the outcome you're looking for. Michael has a really good point. So literally, you can pick the battle that you want to engage in. Michael said, I'm in the middle. As I get older, I learn to pick my battles better. And I love this idea of like, is this, so my uncle always says, is this the hill I want to die on? Like, do I really want to die on the hill of that guy didn't clean his weights? Absolutely not. It's just really not important. And I love that this resonates so much with you guys. It's making me very happy. Ashley, did you have something you wanted to add?
Who, me?
Yeah. No, I thought Ashley raised her hand maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of you and I can only scroll so fast. Okay. Well, if you want to interrupt me, please feel free. So the last thing that I want to challenge you guys a little bit with is there is a difference between depression and burnout. So I know we talked a little bit about this a couple of mindsets ago. I just want to give you a reminder. The key differences between depression and burnout are a little bit nuancy. However, they can also overlap. And so this is why sometimes talking to a professional can really help. This is also why having a strong relationship with somebody either at work or at home or in your community that can help you process through this. Like, am I really dealing with burnout or am I dealing with depression? And so while they can overlap, there are some differences. One is how long your symptoms last. The idea behind burnout is that it has an end. So when you experience burnout, you will at some point lay on the ground and give up. Whether it's a job that's super stressful, whether it's a relationship that you've been giving 90% to and that person's only been giving you 10% back, whether it's, I mean, I was involved in a car accident about 10 years ago, and at some point, like 3 or 4 years into all the like litigation and stuff, I just said, I'm out. Like, I no longer care about any of this because it's just taking up too much of my brain space. And ironically enough, like 2 weeks later, they all settled and everything was done. But burnout is an overwhelming feeling of exhaustion due to intense and prolonged stress from an intense job. I use burnout in other spectrums too, but it really did start from talking about employment and employment being overwhelming and that being pervasive and plaguing you. So burnout is usually extreme exhaustion, and it's definitely indicated by reduced performance. So even if you're showing up more hours of the week, more hours of the day, your performance is lacking. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand that this burnout can be a subset of depression. and depression can also be a subset of burnout. So I just want you to understand that they can be confusing, and it's definitely beneficial for you to have a conversation with somebody about which one you're dealing with. Some of the solutions to burnout include talking to your manager about what's actually contributing to the burnout and making some kind of solution-based decisions about that. And then also finding a way to understand how those wellness tactics and habits can then directly impact and intervene with your symptoms of depression and your potential burnout. So what do I do? Well, I always suggest that you start with your PCP. Most health plans like you to kind of talk with your PCP first to see if there's something medical going on. You should always rule out a physical ailment before you start to assume that it's other things. I've seen a lot of older folks, I'm talking older, like 70s and up, that feel like they have depression or anxiety, but in actuality, they're just in the early stages of like decline. So whether it's Alzheimer's or dementia, and that intervention is different than medication and talk therapy. So you'll want to be careful, and you'll want to be very specific when you talk about your symptoms. I probably get 2 to 3 calls a week that says, people saying like, are you taking new clients? And how do I know if I need a therapist? And it usually in about 10 to 15 minutes can help you decide if that's the right direction to go. Locally, we have a super robust Psychology Today collection of therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists. So that's a good option if you're starting to look for someone to engage in a talk therapy relationship with. And the internet, while an enormous blessing, can take you down a rabbit hole. So I would suggest being careful with how much research you do solely on the internet. But obviously, like, I'm in a relationship with you guys and Keller Williams. So if you ever have questions about this kind of stuff, you're totally welcome to email me or call me. I've very much enjoyed those of you that I've been able to help in the past. So, and I learned just as much from you guys as you do from me. So I'm always happy to help as well. And that's it. Dun, da, da, da. What questions can I answer for you? Thoughts that you guys have, things where you think I'm incorrect or I need to do more research, which I'm always open to.
Do you ever see people who almost manifest themselves from a spouse's symptoms?
You want the short answer or the long answer?
Choose your own adventure.
The short answer is yes. The long answer is the longer we're in a relationship where we feel safe and secure, the more likely we are to take on traits of our partner.
So as one goes, the other goes?
If you are in a safe and secure connection, yes.
Then
That's why we have such a...
Sorry, go ahead.
That's why you have such difficulties leaving long-term relationships, right? Because we think that we're safe and secure when in actuality, we're really struggling with how our values don't align with what our spouse is dealing with. And I'm not a like divorce pusher. I'm just saying that as we evolve, we change. I just am extraordinarily interested in how people aren't able to work with each other in long-term relationships. We start to take on the patterns of our spouse, and then we get to the point of resentment because we didn't recognize that we were taking on the traits of our spouse and do something about it. It doesn't mean you have to leave. It just means it might be time to seek some guidance about what you do about it. And the last part of that is both of you have to be on the same page about it. Like both of you have to be willing to change and willing to prioritize the other person over yourself. It's why the 5 Love Languages is such a brilliant book, because it's not about your partner knowing yours. It's about you knowing your partners. And the empowerment comes when both of you speak that at the same time. So you're both prioritizing each other over yourselves, but then you end up feeling prioritized because your partner's prioritizing you.
Mm-hmm. Dialogue is, I guess, the shortest answer.
Dialogue. And Michael, that's such a good question. Maybe I should do like a relationship mindset, but one of the things that's worked for me, I've been married for 12 years. I've been with Tommy for almost 15. One of the things that strikes me the most about our communication style is I don't have any fear saying stuff to him. Like, he may not like it, And I definitely don't like it when he says things to me sometimes, but at least we're opening up a conversation about something that's difficult. And then we're like laying it out on the table so that people can have opinions about it. Like, I would say, because I'm words of affirmation and he's quality time, the majority of the place that we butt heads is when those two things don't match. Like when one of us is doing more than the other. So I think it is communication, but it's not just talking. It's really about understanding what your partner needs and then doing that. And then them also doing that for you.
I like it. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Ooh, that is cold. Ooh. Switch to water now. Any other questions?
See, sometimes it's good to have a crowded desk. You got your cups and multiple cups.
Oh, you're saying for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really wish I'd have thrown the Rice Krispie treat wrapper away, because now I want another one. And I've been thinking about it the whole time because I'm just staring at it. And I actually brought two.
Oh.
So this one actually has one in it. And I probably don't need to eat that second one. But we'll see what happens.
No calories in them on Fridays.
And life is short. Eat the Rice Krispie treat.
I think I read that in a book somewhere.
Oh. I did read that they're good pre-workout, like easily digestible sugar and carbs that help you have a more productive time in the gym. So now I just need to learn how to eat them before I go to the gym instead of after. I'm so happy to see all of you. I'm like looking at all these lovely faces.
Can I say something is depression's it's a tricky topic. So thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for and teaching these kind of things, because if you guys don't know, I really believe strongly in mental health and supporting that, and it's something I think in all industries it is not discussed, or at least supported enough, and that's why I wanted Heather to come on and do something kind of on a regular basis, and this thing has grown. And funny enough, I look at things, and I'll be transparent for a second too, is I look at these kind of things like, and I talked to Heather, I'm like, hey, only X amount of people showed up. Maybe we got to change things up, a different time or a different topic, or maybe it's not working or what have you. And because I'm having like running a real estate brokerage firm hat on. And she's like, yeah, but what if we change the lives of just one person? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's 100% true. It's not a sales thing. This is a human thing and a mental health thing. And so, I believe strongly in that. That's an amazing thing. A couple of, I don't know, a few years ago, I was teaching a class, and I was talking about the daily activities that one should have in order to be successful. And I remember, I'm not going to mention any names, obviously, but I remember in the student, a bunch of students, someone had said they looked a little down, and I had brought something up, and I waited till after that session, after that class, and I approached them and just said, "Hey, is everything okay?" And the response was, "You don't know what it's like. I have depression, and everything is kind of closing in on me, and that sort of thing." And I don't know why I'm very private about those kind of things. I just mentioned, I said, I have that as well. And you can do a lot of things. That's not a prison sentence by any stretch. And when I said it, I didn't realize I said it loud enough for other people to hear. And it impacted the room. And people were coming up to me afterwards and saying, I can't believe you run the company and you're doing these different things, and you have this thing that is kind of labeled as being debilitating, and you can't function, and all these other kind of things. So, while I'm normally extremely private about that kind of stuff, I also think it's important to understand it and what it is, and address it for whatever it's worth, and get help. And that's why we have, and Heather, by the way, is my therapist. So that's why I brought her on. She's phenomenal. And, these kind of things for mental health are super, super, super important, because we're all human, especially now going through COVID and the pandemic. The world has changed. Everything is just a little bit different. And I think it's always a good idea to remind ourselves to give each other grace, to give ourselves grace, and all those kind of things, because it's kind of a different place. So having a community like this, a very safe space where we can discuss these kind of things, I think is extremely important. So thank you, Heather, for doing these things on a regular basis for us.
My pleasure. I love coming and hanging with you. And I always appreciate when you share too. It's lovely to hear people talk openly about the things that they struggle with. Miss Lisa.
Yeah, I got
wanna
to
add
chime
something?
in. You know me. I
Okay,
do.
I love it.
I want to acknowledge Chad too, because he is very transparent about it. And I've struggled with depression for decades and have managed it. And what I noticed from managing people for years and coaching people is there's a lot more people that have depression that's undiagnosed. And I think the beauty of COVID is it's brought it to the forefront. I was listening to it. They were talking about it on TV this morning. My father had it. I recognized it. He thought psychiatrists were nuts. You know, he was an MD. He thought psychiatrists were nuts, and they all became psychiatrists because they were screwed up. Well, he was screwed up. So I appreciate it. And I would say that probably a third of the people I talk to suffer from it, and they don't understand it. But it's the grace of Chad being willing to do something like this and bringing you in, I think speaks volumes for our culture and speaks volumes for Chad, who you are. You know, just opening up and making it okay. I think some of probably the greatest people on this planet that have created amazing things suffered from depression. And if you really look at the biographies of those people, you'll see that. They're people that care. They're people that feel things, that are sensitive, that are introspective, and a toll comes with that. So yeah, I'm reading Michael, for generations, mental health was a taboo topic. Yeah, and you know what was happening is people were pretending.
Yeah.
And when they pretend, this has been an interesting year for me of taking on friendships with people that I normally would have just pushed to the side, thinking they were sort of damaged. And this has been a year of embracing them, including a number of people on this call know I just sold a house to a guy that spent 33 years in jail for murder, and talking to his humanity and what he experienced and how he turned it into such anger and vitriol. So I think these are important conversations to have because they make us better real estate agents. They make us better parts of our community. And it's drastically undiagnosed. And I think we don't even understand all of the source of it. But being able to have a safe place to talk about it and understand ourselves better and each other better, I think is just amazing.
Yeah. I love how creative you guys are when you talk about these topics too. So it's a huge blessing for me to be able to talk about what I love with a bunch of folks that I might not be able to connect with for various reasons, whether our paths just don't cross or, you know, our industries don't cross or, you know, whatever reason. But the invitation to come and share the things that feed my soul with all of you, like clearly they're interesting to you or you wouldn't show up, one. I guess unless your boss watches to see if you show up, and maybe there's that. But I think that it's really important for us to be able to open up conversations so it makes it a little less tricky when you open them up with each other. And depression, like we talked about, is like this huge spectrum of experiences, you know, like this is why when you go to a therapist, and I'll just put a little plug in for mental health professionals, when you go to a therapist, your first session isn't the answer. Like your first session is usually a brain dump. And I recently started seeing a therapist about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. And I've gone several times in my life. During grad school, it's actually mandatory. But finally, with all of the chaos of COVID and being an essential worker and everything, I was like, I need somewhere to like dump all of this. And it needs to not be on my husband's plate. So I started seeing her. And literally the first session was like 55 minutes of me just like barfing all over the place. Like, and then there's this, and then there's this, and then there's this. And she at the end was like, well, I'd love to set up a second session for you, but I do have another session in 5 minutes. So what do you think about that? And we just like established a relationship from there. And there are therapists that specialize in seeing other therapists because it can be a little nuancy, but I love that we can have conversations about, I'm really struggling with this, but it doesn't have to be like a forever thing either. Like you can go to your boss and say, wow, this is really just a tough time in my life. I'm dealing with X, Y, Z. And then it can be reconciled in 6 months or a year. Maybe it isn't, but I love that you guys are open to talking about this. I also, I don't want to, like, we call this doorknob moments when your client at the end of the session says, oh, and by the way, also this, and you're like, but we need to talk about, oh no, I don't mean to doorknob you guys, but there are so many things that contribute to depression too. And because it's hereditary, the experiences of the people that have loved us and been in our family, we carry that with us. There's a really amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks a lot about how trauma gets carried between generations. So again, if you guys have questions or you want to thought process or something, I'm available, and I can help refer you to other people if I'm not the right fit for you. So please always reach out if you need something. But any last questions or last thoughts, Chad?
No, I think that's it. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Heather, for doing this. Thanks everyone for showing up. I think this is one of those kind of things that the best gift that we can give someone else, to Teresa's comment, and you're welcome, Teresa, for having this, is invite other people that you think might need it. Not a real estate thing. So if someone outside of the industry or anything else that you think that this might be good for, by all means, in the Market Center, our fellow agents too. Absolutely. I'd love to grow it to what it organically should be, Heather. But this is amazing. So I appreciate it. I hope all of you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I can't wait. Oh, look out for a survey coming out from either Heather or Tyler. We're not sure how to set that up yet, but it is going to be a survey. Next month will be an FAQ, right?
Yeah.
Kind of open.
I'm super excited about it.
A town hall session.
Right.
A town hall therapy.
Like everything you wanted to ask your monthly mindset therapist that you haven't been able to ask your monthly mindset therapist.
Absolutely. Sounds wonderful. I appreciate it.
Question. Heather, what mindset podcast do you listen to?
Let me find it for you. It is called The Mindset Mile by Aisha Zaza, and it's on Spotify.
Okay, I have one I listen to called Mindset Mentor, so I wasn't sure if it was the same one.
Oh, I've listened to that one.
Yeah.
But I think that one's on, I think I listened to that one on Apple Podcasts, but yeah, I've listened to that one too. And for those of you that have asked me, like either in the chat or through email, I do have a small private practice. I don't take any insurance plans. I'm not paneled with any of the local insurance companies, but if you have insurance and you want to use insurance to see a therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, you can reach out to me and I can help sort of network that. If you could send me an email, it's heather@changeworkshawaii.com. Jewel has it, Chad has it, I think Tyler has it too. Please send me an email and I'm happy to help get you some names of folks that you can potentially connect with.
Thanks again. I appreciate it. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Bye,
Have
guys.
a wonderful weekend.
Mahalo.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Mahalo. Have a great one.